Let me tell you something that might sting a little. Most people don't care about your problems. And the ones who do, they can't fix them for you. We live in a world where venting has become a habit. We call it sharing. We post it, we text it, we talk about it. But here's the truth. Every time you talk about your problems instead of solving them, you give your power away. You're not healing, you're rehearsing pain. And the more you repeat it, the deeper it gets wired into your brain. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying suffer in silence. I'm saying stop looking for sympathy and start building strength. Because no one is coming to save you. But the good news is, you don't need them to. Let me tell you something nobody wants to hear. Venting is a trap. It feels good, right? That moment when you finally let it all out. You grab your phone, call your best friend, and just start unloading about your boss, your partner, your family, your stress, your life. You talk, and for a minute you feel lighter, like you've done something productive. But here's the problem. You haven't. You've just fallen into a cycle that will keep you stuck exactly where you are. See, venting feels like release, but it's actually rehearsal. Every time you repeat your problems, you're not just talking about them, you're reinforcing them. Your brain doesn't know the difference between something happening right now and something you're simply recalling in vivid detail. So when you vent, your brain experiences the stress all over again. The same cortisol floods your body, the same frustration builds, and the same story gets wired in deeper. It's like digging the same hole every single day and wondering why you can't get out of it. And here's the part that really stings. Most people aren't listening to help you heal. They're listening out of habit or worse, curiosity. And when you vent repeatedly to the same people, you're training them to see you as someone who's overwhelmed, not someone who's powerful. Every time you pick up the phone and pour your problems out like it's therapy, you're not just telling them your struggles, you're handing over your identity. You're saying, this is who I am. But it's not. That's just who you're being in that moment, stuck in a loop. You don't need to vent to feel better. What you need is clarity. You need to understand that emotional energy is not infinite. Every time you spend that energy talking about what's wrong, you're robbing yourself of the strength to make it right. That quick hit of relief you get from venting, it's like eating junk food when you're starving. It fills the moment, but it leaves you weaker in the long run. Because venting doesn't move you forward, it keeps you circling the same emotional drain again and again. And the truth is, when you keep repeating the same problems, your mind becomes addicted to the story. You become so familiar with the feeling of being overwhelmed or angry or defeated that anything outside of that feels unfamiliar, even success, even peace. So you go back to what you know. You vent, you complain, you think you're releasing pressure, but you're actually refueling it, reigniting the stress. And you wonder why things aren't changing. It's because venting is a distraction. It gives you the illusion of action without requiring the discipline of change. Let me ask you this. What would happen if, instead of telling someone your problem, you asked yourself what you were going to do about it? Not tomorrow, not when you feel better, right now. The more you talk about problems, the more power you give them. Read that again. Every time you open your mouth to describe the problem, you're not just explaining it, you're feeding it. You're giving it air, you're giving it life. It's like picking up a flame and blowing on it every single day, wondering why it keeps burning. Most people don't realize this. Words are not harmless. Words are powerful. And when you speak, your brain listens. So if you keep saying you're stuck, you're tired, you're overwhelmed, your brain will believe it. And worse, it will build your identity around it. You start living in that narrative. You wake up in the morning already expecting things to go wrong. You walk into rooms already defeated. You look in the mirror and see someone who's burdened, not someone who's built for more. Why? Because you've repeated the problem so many times, it's no longer something you're going through. It's become something you are. You've labeled yourself with the struggle, and that label becomes a lens. Everything you experience, everything you touch, everything you attempt, it all gets filtered through the belief that you're dealing with something bigger than you, And it gets worse because the more you talk about a problem, the more you invite other people to see you through that lens too. You become the one who always has drama or the one who never catches a break. People stop expecting solutions from you. They stop seeing your strength. They start treating you like someone who's always stuck, and eventually you start acting like it. That's how subtle this is. That's how dangerous repetition can be. Your words are seeds. And every time you repeat a problem, you're planting it again. You're giving it roots. You're allowing it to grow in the soil of your mind. And every thought you have after that becomes watered by it. Before long, you don't even notice it's there. You just assume life is hard or unfair or that things never work out for you because the story has become automatic. But here's the thing, a thought repeated becomes a belief, and a belief repeated becomes your reality. So if you keep saying you're stuck, don't be surprised when you stay stuck. If you keep saying people are against you, don't be shocked when you feel alone. It's not just about what's happening in your life. It's about what you're telling yourself about what's happening. That story becomes the architecture of your mindset. And the architecture of your mindset becomes the blueprint for your behavior. You act according to what you believe. And you believe what you say. That's why some people stay trapped in the same pain for years. Because they keep telling themselves the same story every day. They keep giving the problem the microphone. They keep repeating it like a mantra. And eventually, the problem becomes louder than the solution. Not because the solution doesn't exist, but because they've drowned it out with noise. People remember your weakness more than your story. That's the part no one talks about. You think you're sharing your truth. You think you're opening up, being vulnerable, being real. And yes, vulnerability is powerful, but not when it becomes your identity. Not when it's all you bring to the table. Because the harsh truth is, people aren't always listening to understand. They're listening to remember. And what they remember isn't your pain, your process, or even your effort. They remember your breakdown, your fear, your failures. That one moment when you lost control, when you fell apart, when you exposed the chaos. It's not because people are cruel, it's because the brain is wired to notice extremes, and weakness, emotional or otherwise, is a mental highlighter. It stands out, it leaves a mark. And if you're constantly putting your struggles on display, hoping for connection or compassion, what you're actually doing is branding yourself with your problems. That becomes your reputation. You become the person who's always going through something. Not the fighter, not the comeback story, just the one who never seems to get it together. That sticks. People start to lower their expectations of you. They don't call you for opportunities because they think you're not ready. They don't trust you with big responsibilities because they remember the breakdown, not the bounce back. They remember the tears, not the resilience. And that's a real cost. You may not even know it's happening, but you're being quietly boxed in by your own narrative. Here's the mistake we make. We confuse connection with exposure. We think the more people know about our pain, the more connected they'll feel. But the truth is, connection isn't built on how much you reveal. It's built on how you rise. People are inspired by what you've overcome, not what you're still drowning in. And if you keep putting your wounds on display, don't be shocked when people start to treat you like you're broken, like someone who needs help instead of someone who can give it. And let's be honest, sometimes people use your weakness against you. You think you're in a safe space, you think you're being heard with empathy, but the moment you walk away, that information travels, that weakness echoes. Not because you're wrong for having problems, but because not everyone is built to carry your truth with care. And when the wrong people know your weak spots, you hand them the map to your buttons. You give them power they didn't earn and they didn't deserve. That's why you need to be intentional with what you share and with who. Not everyone gets a front row seat to your personal battles, because most people don't look at the whole story. They just grab the headline. And if the headline is always pain, drama, or defeat, that's all they'll ever associate with you. Even if you grow, even if you win, They'll still see the version of you that cried on the phone that night, or broke down in that meeting, or posted that emotional story. Healing begins when action replaces complaint. You can't talk your way out of a problem you behaved yourself into. Read that again. Because so many people believe that if they just keep talking about what's wrong, somehow magically the solution will appear. But the truth is, healing is not a conversation, it's a decision. It's what you do when no one's listening, when no one's watching, when the excuses finally run out and the mirror becomes too honest to ignore. We live in a culture where complaining has become a language. It's how people bond. It's how they connect. They meet up and talk about how tired they are, how unfair things are, how nothing ever works out. But here's the problem. Complaining doesn't change anything. It doesn't shift your life. It doesn't create momentum, and it definitely doesn't build strength. What it does is trap you in the same place, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because the more time you spend talking about the problem, the less energy you have to do something about it. And let's be honest, complaining is easier than changing. It feels good in the moment. It gives you a sense of release, a sense of validation, but it's fake relief. It's temporary comfort that costs long-term growth. Because every time you complain without action, you're rehearsing helplessness. You're teaching your brain that you're stuck, and worse, you're okay with staying stuck as long as you get to talk about it. Healing doesn't start with a breakthrough. It starts with a choice, a decision to stop spinning in the same circle and take one small step forward. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need 100 people cheering you on. You need movement. Because action is clarity. Action is power. Action is proof that you're not waiting for someone to rescue you. You're choosing to rescue yourself. You know, it's exhausting waking up every day to the same problems you talked about yesterday, carrying the same weight, the same fears, the same frustrations, because you were too busy venting to make a move. That's the real burnout, not hard work, not long hours, but emotional stagnation, feeling like nothing's changing because nothing is changing. You're stuck in the waiting room of your own life, flipping through the same story over and over. But the moment you take action, even small action, the story begins to shift. You start to build momentum. You start to build trust with yourself. And that trust is what healing is made of. Not motivation, not magic, movement. Getting up and doing the thing even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Because every action you take is a vote for the person you're becoming. And every complaint you make without action, that's a vote to stay the same. Nobody is coming to push you. Nobody is coming to fix it. The difference between a person who stays wounded and a person who heals isn't the amount of pain. It's what they do with it. Not everyone deserves access to your struggles. Read that again slowly, because in a world obsessed with sharing, oversharing, and telling it all, we've lost the power of privacy. We've confused being open with being exposed. Somewhere along the way, we started believing that in order to be real, we have to be raw with everyone. But that's not real. That's reckless. Your pain, your process, your private battles, they are sacred, and not everyone has earned the right to witness them. When you hand your struggle to the wrong person, you're not unburdening yourself. You're giving ammunition to someone who might not have the maturity, the loyalty, or the character to hold it. And that's how pain multiplies, not just from the wound itself, but from the betrayal of trusting someone who never deserved that part of you. We think sharing our pain makes us stronger, but what actually makes us strong is knowing who to share it with, and more importantly, who not to. There are people who will listen only to gossip about you later. There are people who will smile while you speak and silently judge your weakness. They'll nod, they'll sympathize, but the moment they walk away, your struggle becomes a story, a headline, a rumor. That's the cost of giving everyone access to your lowest moments. And once your struggle becomes public property, you can't control how it's used. You can't take it back. You can't erase it from their version of you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not tell them. Not because you're hiding, but because you're protecting what's still healing. Think about a wound. It needs time to close before it's touched. And your emotional wounds are no different. Telling your story while you're still bleeding Doesn't make you brave. Sometimes it makes you vulnerable in the wrong way, wide open to opinions, projections, and judgments you were never meant to carry. And here's the part no one talks about. When you share too soon, too often, you start to depend on the reaction of others to validate your pain. You begin to measure your healing by how much attention or sympathy you get. That's dangerous because healing isn't a performance. It's not something to be consumed by others. It's quiet, it's internal, and sometimes it requires solitude, silence, distance from the noise of people who just won't understand, not because they're bad people, but because they're not your people. Guard your energy, guard your growth. You are not required to explain your pain to everyone who asks. You're not obligated to unpack your past in rooms that don't feel safe. You don't owe your story to anyone who hasn't proven they can hold it with care. Because your struggle is not just information. It's a part of your becoming. And if you give it to the wrong hands, it can delay the very healing you're fighting for. So here's the truth you need to carry with you. Your problems are real. Your pain is valid, but your power is greater. You don't need to broadcast your battles to feel seen. You don't need validation from the world to move forward. What you need is focus. What you need is boundaries. What you need is the courage to rise quietly, to grow privately, and to protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does. And the people who win in life aren't the ones who complain the loudest. They're the ones who act the fastest. The ones who stop rehearsing pain and start rewriting their story. You owe it to yourself to live a life that's built on strength, not sympathy. So speak less about the problem and work more on the solution. Save your energy for the climb, not for explaining the mountain. Your struggle doesn't define you. What you do next does. So get up, move forward, and remember, not everyone needs to understand your journey, because it's not theirs to understand. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself, protect your energy, and as always, keep going. Goodbye and take care.